After a bomb threat, the emergency adjournment came after Judge Colin Lamont refused Krejcir's application to postpone the matter further. For more on the story, we cross live to our reporter Gillian Pillay. Gillian, a very good morning to you. We spoke to you a bit earlier today. Give us some indication as to what the mood is like at the moment in that very court.
A very good morning to you again, Ayanda. Yes, we're still unable to access Court 6E, and understandably so, as you said, an emergency evacuation late yesterday afternoon. But what we've seen in the short period that we've been here is that members of the K9 unit have now entered this particular courthouse, sweeping the 12-story building with members of the K9 unit, just to ensure that there's no imminent threat or a continuation of a threat should proceedings continue today. But just to talk to us about the legalities that emanated from proceedings yesterday, I'm now joined by Tyrone Maseko, who is a criminal law expert. Thank you for joining us, Tyrone. Just talk to us about Lamont pushing for proceedings to continue. Was the court right in its thinking yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, you'll recall that it's been consistent from the last appearance. I think it was towards the end of last year when continuous postponements were requested. You could see that even then Judge Lamont was frustrated because he really wanted proceedings to continue and this matter to be concluded. So I think he's pretty much made up his mind that, you know, there are delaying tactics here which he's really not interested in. So in that regard, I think it was appropriate. But yeah, I mean, I suppose one can accept that there were technicalities here and there needed to make certain decisions. Yeah.
Let's talk about Krejcir, who had made pleas for an interpreter. He had made pleas for his shackles to be removed. People would ask, wouldn't that be a breach of constitutional rights?
It's a good question, and it's quite interesting because, you know, depending on how you're looking at it, so that you almost have competing interests here. The first is we know that everyone is entitled to conduct proceedings in the language of their choice, so you have to understand what is going on. That is an essential right for an accused, and that is why we generally see interpreters in court. But that is something that you request up front. You know, it's made clear before the trial starts what language the trial is going to be conducted in. As to the question of whether you can flip-flop when it suits you, that can also be seen as a delaying tactic, and I don't think that the court would be interested in such, and I think that's how matters panned out on that score yesterday. So I think in that regard it might actually be fair because he chose and he understands English, and we know that he's quite fluent and very conversant in English.
The shackles plea that he had made, just talk to me about that. He was the only accused person, the convicted person, should I say, who had shackles on his wrists and his ankles.
Yeah, and that's a function of risk. It's a function of risk, and it's not a necessity that every single accused who comes to court, or convict even, who comes to court has to be shackled. And the general rule is that, you know, most people are not, especially when you haven't been convicted, or where you have been convicted and you haven't been sentenced. As long as you don't pose a risk to the court, members of the public, then generally you won't be shackled. But in this instance, they do regard him as a high risk, and for good reasons. When you consider the threats that we've seen before, the judges, as I recall, the judge himself is actually under protection, and various other members of the court, so he does pose a significant risk.
The recusal application, did Krejcir have sufficient grounds to ask Lamont to recuse himself?
Well, he tried, and I think the important thing to remember there is you can't get a judge to recuse himself simply on the basis that you don't like the charge. You know, you've got to have some compelling reasons, objective reasons as to his bias, and you have to be able to demonstrate that. And judges are actually quite good at considering whether, in fact, they are actually biased, or there's a perception that they may be biased, and they will recuse themselves. It's, I think, unique in our law to see judges recuse themselves. That's something that actually does happen. But in this instance, you know, the tensions are high, but it's quite clear, and Judge Lamont is frustrated at times, but that in itself is not a reason for him to recuse himself from the matter.
Just one last question, and I'm pushing it here. A lot of just the movie-making detail and events around this case. Just talk to us about that, just as a person who has seen quite a few criminal cases.
Well, I mean, criminal cases vary, you know. You get the run-of-the-mill, which is probably like 95% or so of matters, and then you get these special matters where, you know, accused people are considered to be high risk, and you get all these technicalities. And I mean, we all know Krejcir's history from having moved from one country to another, and all the changes that his face has been here for that long. So it does make it interesting, but it's nothing unique, really.
And that's Tyrone. Expert just talking to us about just some of the interesting detail coming out of this case and giving us some more detail around the legalities of what transpired here at court yesterday. Ayanda.
Thank you so much for that update, Gillian. That's definitely a story that's a one to look out for throughout the course of today. We'll continue to cross live to Gillian and just keep track and abreast of the developments there.